The moment my dad tossed those keys across the dinner table like he was doing me some grand favor, I felt my blood pressure spike. Mom was already laughing about how generous we were all being with my space, how my sister Brooke just needed somewhere to crash temporarily. They sat there, carving their pot roast, completely oblivious to what they'd just done. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against their hardwood floor, heart hammering against my ribs with 28 years of suppressed rage. Funny thing about that, I said, my voice quieter than I expected. I haven't lived there for 6 weeks. Mom's fork clattered against her plate, and the room went dead silent. Wait, her voice trembled. Then where exactly have you been staying? The silence stretched between us like a loaded gun. My parents stared at me with identical expressions of confusion mixed with growing alarm. Brooke was supposed to arrive any minute, probably already packing her bags, expecting to waltz into my place like she owned it. 6 weeks ago, I began, settling back into my chair because this story needed telling properly. I came home from that business conference in Denver. Remember? The one you said was probably just an excuse for me to party. I looked directly at Dad, who had the decency to shift uncomfortably in his seat. I unlocked my apartment door at 11:30 at night, completely exhausted, ready to collapse into my own bed. Instead, I found some guy I'd never seen before standing in my kitchen wearing nothing but boxer shorts, eating leftover pizza from my refrigerator. Mom's hand flew to her chest. What, Arlo? You never said anything about a break-in. It wasn't a break-in, I continued, my voice getting steadier with each word. This guy looks at me, completely relaxed, and says, "Oh, you must be Brooke's brother. She said you'd be cool with me crashing here." Turns out, my dear sister had been using my apartment as her personal hotel for the past 3 months while I was traveling for work. Dad frowned. That doesn't sound like Brooke would. I went to my bedroom. I cut him off, and found her clothes scattered everywhere, makeup all over my bathroom counter, some other woman's underwear hanging over my shower rod. The spare bedroom I use as an office had been turned into what looked like a damn clothing boutique, with price tags still on half the stuff. I could see Mom trying to process this information, her maternal instincts warring with the growing evidence that her precious youngest daughter might not be the victim she'd always painted herself as. When Brooke finally showed up the next morning, I continued. She walked in like she owned the place, didn't even apologize, just rolled her eyes and said, "Relax, Arlo. I just needed somewhere private to bring dates. My roommate situation is complicated right now." Well, Mom said weakly. Maybe she was just going through a rough patch. I told her it had to stop, I said firmly. I explained that it was my home, that I needed advance notice, that bringing strangers over without my permission was completely unacceptable. You know what she said. Neither of them answered, but I could see Dad's jaw tightening slightly. She laughed and told me I was being dramatic, said the apartment was way too big for just me anyway, and that I should be grateful she was keeping it from getting lonely while I was gone. The front door chimed, and we all heard Brooke's voice calling out, "I'm here, ready to get moved in." Her heels clicked across the entryway, and she appeared in the dining room doorway with 2 large suitcases, and that brilliant smile that had been getting her out of trouble since she was 5. "Hey, family," she said brightly, completely oblivious to the tension in the room. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was insane coming from the city." She looked around at our faces and her smile faltered slightly. "What's going on? You all look like someone died." "Arlo was just telling us about some issues with the apartment," Mom said carefully. Brooke's expression immediately shifted to defensive. "Issues? What kind of issues?" "The kind where you've been treating my home like your personal crash pad without permission," I said evenly. She set down her suitcases with more force than necessary. "Oh, come on. You're still upset about that? I thought we worked it out." "Worked it out." I stood up again, feeling that familiar surge of frustration that came with every interaction with my sister. "When exactly did we work it out, Brooke? Was it before or after I came home to find you'd given my spare key to some guy named Travis who was using my shower?" Mom gasped. "Brooke, you gave out his key. It was temporary." Brooke shot back. "Travis needed a place to clean up before his job interview. I was just trying to help someone. In my apartment, without asking me. You weren't even there. It's still my home." The words came out louder than I intended, and everyone in the room went quiet again. Dad cleared his throat. "Maybe everyone should just calm down and..." "No," I said. my voice returning to that deadly quiet tone. I'm done calming down. I'm done being the understanding big brother who's supposed to just roll over every time Brooke needs something. I looked directly at my sister, who was now standing with her arms crossed, that stubborn expression shed perfected in childhood firmly in place. So 6 weeks ago, after finding Travis in my kitchen, and your clothes in my bedroom and your Airbnb guests, oh yes, I found out about those too, eating my food and using my Netflix account, I made a decision. What decision? Brooke asked, though I could tell from her voice that she was starting to realize this conversation wasn't going the way she'd expected. I moved out. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Brooke's mouth fell open, and I watched as the implications slowly dawned on her face. What do you mean? You moved out? She asked, her voice climbing higher. You can't just move out of your own apartment. Actually, I can, I said, reaching into my wallet and pulling out a new set of keys. These are to my new place. Been living there for 6 weeks now. Mom looked like she might faint, but Arlo, where have you been staying? Why didn't you tell us? Because every time I've tried to set boundaries with Brooke in the past, both of you have told me I was being selfish, that family comes first, that I should be more understanding of her situation. Dad shifted in his chair. Now wait a minute. That's not exactly, isn't it? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a screenshot I'd saved 2 years ago, when I complained about Brooke using my credit card to buy herself a new laptop without asking. What did you say, Mom? Mom looked down at her hands. I don't remember exactly. You said she was going through a hard time after her breakup and that I should be supportive. When I pointed out that she charged $800 to my card without permission, you told me I made enough money that it shouldn't matter. Brooke was getting more agitated by the minute. This is completely different. I needed somewhere to stay, and you have that huge apartment just sitting there empty half the time anyway. It's not sitting empty. I live there. Or I lived there. Past tense. But where are you living now? Mom asked again, her voice getting more strained. Before I could answer, Brooke jumped in with the question that had clearly been burning in her mind. And what am I supposed to do now? I already gave notice at my current place. I told everyone I was moving into my brother's apartment. Told everyone, I asked. What do you mean, everyone? A flush crept up Brooke's neck. You know, friends, people from work. I might have mentioned that I basically had access to this great place downtown. Something cold settled in my stomach. What exactly did you tell them, Brooke? Just that my brother had this awesome apartment that he barely used, and that I was going to be staying there for a while. How long is a while? She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. I don't know, until I figured out my next move. And did you mention that you'd never actually asked me about this arrangement? It was implied. Family doesn't need formal permission for everything. I looked at my parents, who were both looking increasingly uncomfortable. So let me get this straight. Brooke has been telling people she's moving into my apartment, an apartment I stopped living in 6 weeks ago because she was already treating it like her personal property, and none of us saw a problem with this plan. Well, when you put it like that, Dad started, but Brooke cut him off. God, Arlo, you're being so dramatic. It's not like I was throwing parties or anything. I was just using it occasionally when I needed privacy. Privacy for what? You know, dates. Whatever. My roommate Jessica is super judgmental about guys I bring over, so you brought them to my place instead. It was convenient. I stared at her, marveling at her complete lack of self-awareness. Brooke, did it ever occur to you that bringing strangers into someone else's home without their knowledge or permission might be a violation of their privacy and security? They weren't strangers to me. They were strangers to me. In my home, Mom finally spoke up, her voice shaky. Brooke, honey, you really should have asked Arlo before using his apartment. Oh, so now you're taking his side. Brooke's voice was getting shrill. Where was all this concern for proper permission when he was being stingy about helping family? I wasn't being stingy, I said, my patience finally reaching its absolute limit. I was being used. There's a difference. Used? Am your sister. Yes, you are. And for the past 10 years, every time you've needed money, a place to stay, someone to co-sign a loan, or help with some crisis that was usually your own making, who did you call? Brooke crossed her arms tighter. Family helps family. And who helps me, Brooke? When I was working 80-hour weeks trying to get promoted, who checked on me? When I was sick with pneumonia last winter, who brought me soup or offered to pick up groceries? Silence. When I was going through my divorce 3 years ago and could barely afford to keep the apartment because I was paying alimony, did anyone in this family offer to help with expenses or even just moral support? More silence. But the minute you need something, its family comes first, and I'm selfish if I don't immediately hand over whatever you want. Brooke's face was getting red now. That's not fair. You make way more money than I do. Because I work for it. I didn't drop out of college twice. I didn't quit 3 different jobs because I didn't like the vibe. I didn't spend my 20s partying and expecting other people to clean up my messes. Arlo, Dad said in his warning voice, there's no need to be cruel. Cruel. I turned to face him fully. Dad, she's been using my apartment as an Airbnb without my knowledge. She gave my spare key to random men. She's been charging friends to stay there while I was out of town for work. Brooke went very still. Who told you that? You just did. I pulled out my phone and showed them a screenshot of a listing I'd found. Care to explain this Airbnb posting for a cozy downtown apartment that looks suspiciously like my living room? The silence that followed was deafening. Brooke's face had gone from red to pale, and she was staring at my phone screen like it might catch fire. Brooke, Mom said quietly, please tell me this isn't what it looks like. It's not that big a deal, Brooke said weakly. I only did it a few times, and I was going to tell Arlo eventually. You were charging people to stay in my apartment without my knowledge. I needed the money, and you weren't even using it. Because I was traveling for work. Work that pays for that apartment. Well, it was just sitting there empty. Stop saying that, I snapped. It wasn't sitting there empty. It's my home. The place I keep my belongings, my personal items, my private space. You turned it into a business without my consent. Dad looked like he was getting a headache. How much money are we talking about here? Brooke mumbled something we couldn't hear. What? I asked. I said, maybe $2,000 over the past few months. The room exploded. $2,000. Mom's voice went up an octave. Brooke Marie, what in the world were you thinking? It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. Brooke was fully in defensive mode now, her voice taking on that whining quality that had gotten her out of trouble as a kid but just made her sound pathetic as an adult. Arlo travels like half the month for work, and I figured, why let all that space go to waste? It's not like he was losing money or anything. Not losing money. I could feel my blood pressure spiking again. Brooke, you were running an illegal subletting operation out of my apartment. Do you have any idea what kind of liability that puts me under? What if one of your guests had been injured? What if they'd stolen something or damaged the property? That didn't happen, though. That's not the point. I was shouting again, but I didn't care anymore. The point is that you took it upon yourself to make that decision without asking me, without considering the risks, and without giving me a cent of the money you made from my property. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Now, Arlo, I'm sure Brooke was planning to share the profits. Were you, Brooke? I asked pointedly. Were you planning to share the profits from illegally subletting my apartment? She fidgeted with her purse strap. I was going to pay you back for utilities and stuff. That's not what I asked. Well, I had expenses too. I had to clean the place and buy new sheets and towels, and coordinate with people. It wasn't just free money. I stared at her in disbelief. So you're telling me that you used my apartment as a business, charged strangers to sleep in my bed, and you think you deserve to keep all the money because you had to wash some sheets? When you say it like that, it sounds worse than it was. It was exactly as bad as it sounds. Mom was wringing her hands. Brooke, honey, you really should have asked permission. This is Arlo's home we're talking about. Oh, so now everyone cares about Arlo's feelings. Brooke shot back. Where was this concern when you were asking me to help convince him to let me stay there? I went very still. What does that mean? Mom and Dad exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. What does that mean? I repeated, my voice getting dangerously quiet. Dad shifted in his chair again. Son, we might have mentioned to Brooke that we thought you'd be open to helping her out with temporary housing. You told her it'd be okay with this before asking me. Not exactly, Mom said quickly. We just said that you were family-oriented and generous, and that we were sure you'd want to help if she needed a place to stay. So you set up the expectation that I'd say yes before giving me the chance to say no. We weren't trying to manipulate anyone, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Weren't you? I looked between my parents, seeing them clearly for maybe the first time in my adult life. You decided among yourselves that my apartment would be the solution to Brooke's housing problem. You encouraged her to plan on moving in, and then you ambushed me with it at dinner while tossing me the keys like it was already decided. We thought you'd be happy to help, Mom said weakly. Happy to help? When have I ever said no to helping this family? When have I ever refused to bail Brooke out of whatever mess she'd gotten herself into this time? Brooke's head snapped up. Whatever mess I'd gotten myself into? My landlord sold the building. It's not like I chose to be homeless. No. But you chose not to look for a new place until 2 weeks before you had to move out. You chose not to save any money from your illegal Airbnb business to pay for a deposit somewhere else. You chose to assume that your brother would just hand over his home because family comes first. I was trying to figure things out, while charging people to sleep in my bed. Dad held up his hands. Everyone needs to calm down. We're family. We can work this out. Can we? I turned to face him directly. Because I'm starting to think there are some things you haven't told me, Dad. Something flickered in his expression. What do you mean? I mean, how exactly were you able to hand me the keys to my own apartment tonight? I never gave you my keys. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I asked Brooke to give them to us, Mom said finally, so we could return them to you properly. Brooke had my keys. More silence. How long has Brooke had keys to my apartment? Dad rubbed his forehead. Arlo, there's something else we need to discuss. My heart started pounding. What? When Brooke was having those financial troubles last year, the credit card debt from her shopping spree, that, yes, and some other issues. She needed help with a car loan, and the bank required collateral. I felt the world start to tilt sideways. What kind of collateral? Just as a backup, you understand. We never thought it would be an issue because Brooke has been making her payments. What did you use as collateral, Dad? He couldn't meet my eyes. Your apartment. The room started spinning. I gripped the back of my chair to keep from falling over. You used my apartment as collateral for Brooke's car loan? Without asking me. You weren't around to ask, and it was an emergency situation. So you forged my signature. I co-signed the loan. As your father, I have some rights. You absolutely do not have the right to put my property up as collateral without my consent. Dad, do you realize what this means? If Brooke defaults on that loan, they can take my apartment. She's not going to default, Dad said quickly. She's been very responsible about making payments. I looked at Brooke, who had gone very quiet and was staring at her hands. Brooke, I said slowly, are you up to date on your car payments? She didn't answer. Brooke, I'm a little behind, she whispered. But I'm working on it. How far behind? 3 months, she admitted. The room erupted in chaos. Mom started crying. Dad started yelling at Brooke about being irresponsible. And Brooke started making excuses about how her work hours had been cut, and it wasn't her fault. But all I could hear was the sound of my entire life crumbling around me. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was back in my chair, staring at my family like they were strangers, 3 months behind on car payments. My apartment is collateral, illegal subletting, identity theft of my property. How much does she owe? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Dad shuffled through some papers, head pulled from a folder beside his chair. Papers Head apparently brought to this dinner, knowing we'd be having this conversation. The remaining balance is about $22,000, and if she defaults completely, they could potentially pursue the collateral. But, which is my home? Arlo, Mom said through her tears, we never intended for it to get this complicated. No, I said, standing up again. I bet you didn't, just like you never intended for me to find out about the Airbnb business, or the unauthorized key distribution, or the fact that you've been treating my property like the family bank account. Brooke finally looked up. It's not like you were even living there anyway. Because you made it impossible to live there. You turned my home into a hotel and then acted like I was the problem for objecting to it. The front door opened again, and I heard a familiar voice call out, Arlo, your mom said to come around back when I got here. Sarah appeared in the doorway. and I felt a rush of relief so intense it nearly knocked me over. She looked stunning, as always, polished, confident, successful, everything my family had convinced me I didn't deserve. "Hi," she said, taking in the tear-stained faces and tense body language with the quick assessment that had made her such a good attorney. "Am I interrupting something?" "Not at all," I said, crossing to her and kissing her cheek. "Mom, Dad, Brooke, I'd like you to meet Sarah." "Sarah, this is my family." I watched my parents' expressions change as they took in Sarah's appearance. The designer suit, the expensive handbag, the confidence that came with success. This wasn't the kind of woman they'd imagined their disappointment of a son ending up with. "It's wonderful to meet you," Sarah said graciously, shaking hands with my parents. "Arlos told me so much about you." "He has?" Mom asked, clearly flustered. "Has never mentioned you to us." "Well," Sarah said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "we've been together for 8 months now. I imagine he was waiting for the right time." The silence that followed was pregnant with implications. 8 months. It'd been in a serious relationship for 8 months and hadn't told my family because it'd known exactly how they'd react. They'd immediately start calculating how Sarah could be useful to them. 8 months, Dad repeated slowly. "And you two are living together," I said simply. "Sarah owns a penthouse downtown. That's where I've been staying since I left my apartment." I could practically see the wheels turning in my parents' heads as they reassessed everything they thought they knew about my life. "What do you do, Sarah?" Mom asked in that overly polite voice she used when she was intimidated. "I'm a senior partner at Harrison, Klein & Associates, corporate law." Brooke's head snapped up. "The firm with the big building on 5th Street. That's us." "Damn," Brooke said, then caught Mom's sharp look. "I mean, that's impressive. What about you?" Sarah asked pleasantly. "What do you do?" Brooke's cheeks flushed. "In between jobs right now. Actually, that's why I was going to stay at Arlos' place for a while. Was going to." Sarah looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Long story," I said. "I'll fill you in on the drive home." "Home to where, exactly?" Mom asked pointedly. "Our home," I said firmly. "Sarah's penthouse, where I've been living since I left the apartment." Dad was doing some rapid mental math. "Son, that building is pretty upscale. What's rent like in a place like that?" "I'm not paying rent," I said. "I'm paying the mortgage. Sarah added me to the deed 3 months ago." The bombshell hit exactly as I'd intended. My parents stared at me in shock, while Brooke's mouth fell open. "You bought property together?" Mom asked faintly. "Sarah bought the penthouse 2 years ago," I explained. "When we decided to make things official, she added my name to the deed and I took over half the mortgage payments." "How much is half the mortgage on a downtown penthouse?" Brooke asked, and I could see the jealousy burning in her eyes. "More than your car payment," I said simply. Sarah squeezed my arm gently. "Should we head out? I know you wanted to get to that new restaurant before they stopped taking reservations." I nodded, grateful for the escape route. As we started to leave, Brooke called out, "Wait, what am I supposed to do about housing?" "I already gave notice at my current place." I turned back to face her. "I guess you should have thought about that before you turned my apartment into your personal business venture." "Arlo," Mom protested. "She's your sister." "Yes, she is," I agreed. "And maybe it's time she learned to solve her own problems instead of expecting everyone else to clean up her messes." "That's cold, man," Brooke said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I can't believe you're going to leave me homeless." "You're not homeless. You have until the end of the month in your current place, and you've got $2,000 from illegally subletting my apartment to put toward a new deposit somewhere. I already spent that money." "Of course you did." Sarah and I made it to the front door before Brooke called out one more time. "You know what? Fine. If you want to abandon your family for some rich lawyer chick, go ahead. But don't come crawling back when she gets bored of you." Sarah stopped walking and turned around slowly. When she spoke, her voice had the kind of deadly calm that made opposing attorneys nervous in courtrooms. "Excuse me," I said. "When you get bored of him, I heard what you said." Sarah cut her off. "I'm trying to decide if you're brave enough to repeat it to my face." Brooke suddenly looked much less confident. But her pride wouldn't let her back down. "I just think it's convenient that my brother suddenly found himself a sugar mama, right when his family needs help. I started to step forward, but Sarah put a hand on my chest. I see, she said thoughtfully. So, in your mind, the only reason a successful woman would be with your brother is to financially support him. I mean, no offense, but what else would someone like you see in someone like him? The insult hit me like a slap. But before I could respond, Sarah smiled the kind of smile that preceded the destruction of opposing counsel. Someone like me? You mean someone who values intelligence, integrity, hard work, and emotional maturity? Someone who appreciates a partner who's loyal, responsible, and treats people with respect? Someone who recognizes that true success isn't measured by how much you can take from others, but by how much you can build through your own efforts. Brooke's face was getting redder by the second. For your information, Sarah continued, Arlo makes 6 figures as a regional sales manager. Hez on track for promotion to corporate headquarters, which would put his salary higher than mine. He pays half our mortgage, half our utilities, and takes me on vacation twice a year with his own money. If anyone's the sugar mama in this relationship, it's him. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see my parents reevaluating everything they thought they knew about my career and income. 6 figures, Dad asked weakly. He didn't tell you about his promotion? Sarah looked genuinely surprised. Regional manager of the Southwest Division. Youngest person in company history to achieve that level. When did this happen? Mom asked. 4 months ago, I said quietly. Right around the time you told me I should be more understanding about Brooke using my apartment because I'm in a stable place and she needs help. More silence. Well, Brooke said finally, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Congratulations on all your success, Arlo. I guess we know where your priorities are now. And then she did something I should have seen coming but somehow didn't expect. She pulled out her phone. What are you doing? I asked. Calling your office, she said matter-of-factly. I think your boss should know that you've been lying about your living situation and might not be as stable as they think. Sarah and I exchanged glances. Brooke, I said carefully, what exactly do you plan to tell them? The truth, that you abandoned your apartment and your family responsibilities, that you're living off your girlfriend's money, and that you might be having some kind of mental breakdown. That's not, but she was already dialing. The call went straight to my boss' voicemail, but I watched in horror as Brooke left a message claiming I'd been acting erratically and abandoning my responsibilities, and suggested they look into my current mental state. When she hung up, she wasn't done. Next, I think I'll call Sarah's family, she said, scrolling through her contacts. I bet they'd be interested to know what kind of man their daughter is shacking up with. Brooke, stop, Mom said weakly, but there was no real authority in her voice. Why should I? He obviously doesn't care about this family anymore, so why should I protect his reputation? Sarah stepped forward. Because what you're doing is defamation, and as an attorney, I can have you served with papers by Monday morning. You can't sue me for telling the truth. You're not telling the truth. You're making malicious, false statements designed to damage Arlo's reputation and career. That's textbook defamation. But Brooke had already found what she was looking for in her phone. Found them. Sarah Caldwell's parents, right? Robert and Linda Caldwell from Westfield. My blood ran cold. Sarah's family was old money, conservative, traditional, and very concerned about maintaining their social standing. Brooke's accusations could cause serious damage there. Dr. Caldwell, Brooke said into the phone, putting on her most sincere voice. This is Brooke Henderson, Arlo's sister. I'm calling because I'm concerned about some things I've learned about your daughter's relationship. I lunged for the phone, but Brooke dodged away, continuing her poison into the receiver while my parents sat there doing nothing to stop her. Living situation that might not be what it seems. Financial instability. Family abandonment issues. Thought you should know the kind of person she's involved with. Sarah's face had gone pale, and I knew this was exactly the kind of scandal her family had always feared about her dating outside their social circle. When Brooke finally hung up, she was smiling triumphantly. There. Now we're even. Even. I stared at her in disbelief. Brooke, you just potentially destroyed my career and Sarah's relationship with her family because you're upset that I won't let you use my apartment as a hotel. I'm upset that you're abandoning your family. I'm setting boundaries. Same thing. Sarah's phone was already ringing. She looked at the caller ID and closed her eyes. It's my mother. Don't answer it, I said quickly. I have to. If I don't, it'll just make things worse. She answered the phone, and I could hear her mother's agitated voice from across the room, though I couldn't make out the exact words. Yes, Mother. I'm aware of who called you. No, that's not accurate. I understand you're concerned. While Sarah tried to manage the damage with her family, my phone started ringing. Work number. That's my boss, I told my parents. Thanks to Brooke's little stunt, I now have to explain to my employer why my sister is calling them with reports that I'm mentally unstable. I'm sure it won't be that bad, Mom said weakly. Won't be that bad. I answered the phone, putting it on speaker so they could all hear exactly how bad it was. Arlo, came my boss' voice, clearly concerned. I got a very disturbing voicemail from someone claiming to be your sister. She said you've been exhibiting erratic behavior and abandoning responsibilities. I need you to come in Monday morning so we can discuss this. Mr. Peterson, I can explain. I hope you can. Because if there's any truth to these allegations about instability or dishonesty, we'll need to reassess your position with the company, especially given your upcoming promotion review. My promotion, the one that would mean a transfer to corporate headquarters, a 50% salary increase, and the career breakthrough I'd been working toward for 5 years. It'll be there first thing Monday morning, I said. Good. And Arlo? I hope for your sake that this is all some kind of misunderstanding. When I hung up, the room was dead silent except for Sarah's continued conversation with her increasingly upset mother. So, I said to my family, let's recap. In the space of 2 hours, I've learned that my sister has been running an illegal business out of my apartment, that my parents used my property as collateral without my consent, and now Brooke has potentially cost me my career and damaged Sarah's family relationships because she's angry that I won't enable her irresponsible behavior. Arlo, Dad started. Maybe if we all just... No, I cut him off. There's no we anymore. You've made it clear that Brooke's wants will always come before my needs, that my property and my life are resources for this family to use however they see fit. Sarah finished her call and came back to stand beside me. Her face was composed, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. How bad? I asked quietly. They want to meet with us this weekend. My father is concerned about my judgment, and my mother thinks I should reconsider the relationship until this situation stabilizes. Sarah, I'm so sorry, don't apologize. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? Brooke interjected. If he hadn't been so selfish about helping family, none of this would have happened. Sarah turned to look at my sister with an expression that would have frozen lava. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, she said in her courtroom voice. You used Arlo's apartment without permission, ran an illegal business using his property, put his financial security at risk, and when he refused to continue enabling your behavior, you attempted to destroy his career and his personal relationships out of spite. I was trying to protect our family. From what? From Arlo finally standing up for himself? From being held accountable for your actions? You don't understand our family dynamics. I understand them perfectly. Arlo is the responsible one who bails everyone else out, and the rest of you take advantage of his generosity until he has nothing left to give. That's not when's the last time any of you did something for Arlo without expecting something in return? When's the last time you called him just to see how he was doing, or offered to help him with something, or acknowledged that he might have needs of his own? The silence stretched on, and I realized that Sarah had identified something I'd never been able to articulate myself. That's what I thought, she continued. But here is the thing. Brooke, Arlo isn't your personal bank account or your backup plan anymore. Hess building a life with people who value him for who he is, not what he can provide. People like you, Brooke shot back. Rich people who don't understand what it's like to struggle. People like me who worked 3 jobs to get through law school, who built my career without asking my family to co-sign loans or provide housing or clean up my messes. Sarah replied coolly. People who understand that love isn't about what you can take from someone, but what you can give. My phone started ringing again. Then Sarah's. Then my work phone. It's starting, I said, watching the notifications pile up. Voicemails, texts, missed calls. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text. and her face went white as she read it. "What?" I asked. "My law firm. Someone called them, claiming I was involved in some kind of financial fraud scheme with a mentally unstable boyfriend." The pieces clicked into place. "Brooke, who else did you call?" She shrugged, not looking remotely sorry. "I made a few other calls. Sarah's work, some mutual friends, maybe that cousin of yours who works at the bank. Just spreading the word about the kind of person you really are." "You called my cousin at the bank. Someone needs to know that you might not be financially reliable. My credit, my mortgage, my professional reputation, Sarah's career, her family relationships." Brooke had systematically attacked every aspect of our lives that mattered, and she'd done it with surgical precision. And my parents had sat there and watched it happen. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" Mom looked startled. "All of you. Get out of your own house if you have to. But I never want to see any of you again. Arlo." Dad stood up, finally showing some backbone. "That's enough. I know you're upset, but this is still family. Family." I laughed. But there was no humor in it. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't put each other's homes at risk without permission. Family doesn't try to destroy each other's lives out of spite. "We can fix this," Mom said desperately. "We can call everyone back. Explain the misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. You all understand exactly what you've done. You just don't care as long as it benefits Brooke." I took Sarah's hand and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Mom called after us. "To start damage control. And to call my lawyer." "Your lawyer?" Dad asked. "The one who's going to help me figure out how to get my property back from a fraudulent loan, and how to sue for defamation." "You can't sue your own family," Brooke protested. I stopped at the front door and turned back to look at them one last time. "Watch me." But even as we drove away, I knew that Brooke wasn't done. And I was right. Over the next week, the damage mounted. Credit reports were pulled without authorization. False police reports were filed claiming I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. More calls were made to my workplace, to Sarah's clients, to anyone Brooke could find, connected to our lives. By Friday, I was on administrative leave pending investigation. Sarah's law firm had launched their own inquiry into her associations. Her parents had demanded we not see each other until this mess was sorted out. And that's when I realized that Brooke had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. The recording device had been in my jacket pocket the entire time, not because I'd planned any of this, but because I'd gotten into the habit of recording family conversations ever since Brooke had lied to my parents about a loan I'd supposedly agreed to co-sign. After that incident, I'd learned to protect myself with documentation. So when I sat down at Sarah's kitchen table Sunday morning and played back the entire dinner conversation, Brooke's admission about the Airbnb business, Dad's confession about using my apartment as collateral, Brooke's threats and subsequent phone calls, I had everything I needed. "This is evidence of multiple felonies," Sarah said, her lawyer instincts kicking in as she listened to the recording. "Identity theft, fraud, defamation, extortion. Arlo, you could have them all arrested. There's more," I said, pulling out a folder I'd been building for months. I'd hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago, not because I'd expected things to get this bad, but because something had felt off about the whole situation. Too many coincidences, too many convenient crises that always seemed to require my resources to solve. "What is this?" Sarah asked, flipping through the investigator's report. 3 months of surveillance and financial tracking. Turns out Brooke's pattern of behavior extends well beyond just me. The report was damning. Brooke had run similar scams on other family members, friends, even ex-boyfriends. The Airbnb scheme wasn't a desperate one-time mistake. It was part of a systematic pattern of financial fraud that had been going on for years. "She's done this before?" Sarah asked, reading through the documented incidents. "Multiple times. Remember her emergency last year when she needed money for her car down payment? She told me her grandmother had died and left her some money that was tied up in probate, but she needed the car for work. I lent her $3,000. Let me guess, no grandmother death. Her grandmother was already dead. Had been for 10 years. But here's the interesting part. She told the same story to my cousin Jake 2 months later and got another $1,500 out of him." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "So she's been running cons on your entire family, not just family." Look at page 12. Sarah flipped to the page and her mouth fell open. She's been married twice? I thought she'd never been married. Married and divorced twice, both times cleaning out joint bank accounts before filing papers. The second husband filed fraud charges, but she disappeared before they could prosecute. Disappeared where? Back home to live with mom and dad, who told everyone she was just going through a rough patch and needed family support. So your parents have been enabling this behavior for years. Gets better. Check page 15. Sarah read in silence for a few minutes, her expression growing more stunned with each revelation. They've been claiming her as a dependent on their taxes for the past 5 years, even though she's been living independently and running businesses, illegal businesses. And look at the income reported versus her actual earnings. Jesus. Tax fraud. Welfare fraud. Arlo, this woman isn't just irresponsible. She's a career criminal. And my parents have been covering for her every step of the way. Sarah closed the folder and looked at me seriously. What do you want to do with this information? I pulled out my phone and showed her the call log. Every number Brooke called this week to try to destroy our lives. I've got their contact information. You're going to call them back? I'm going to do better than that. I opened my laptop and pulled up a social media post I'd been working on all morning. It was a detailed timeline of Brooke's fraud, complete with documentation, screenshots of the Airbnb listing, photos of the forged loan documents, and audio clips from the recorded dinner conversation. You're going public. Sarah, she didn't just attack me. She attacked you, your family, your career. She filed false police reports and made defamatory statements to our employers. At what point do we stop treating this like a family dispute and start treating it like the criminal enterprise it actually is? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, reading through the post. When she finished, she looked up at me with something that might have been admiration. This is incredibly thorough. And devastating. If you post this, it's going nuclear. There's no coming back from something like this. Good. I'm done coming back. I'm done being the understanding big brother who enables criminal behavior because family comes first. Your parents will never forgive you. My parents watched Brooke try to destroy my career and your reputation and did nothing to stop her. What exactly am I supposed to be forgiving them for? Sarah nodded slowly. You're right. And honestly, after what she did to my family relationships, I want her to face consequences too. So we're doing this. We're doing this. I hit publish. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, the post had been shared 50 times. By evening, it was viral in our hometown social media groups. Friends, neighbors, family members, and people who'd been victims of Brooke's previous scams started commenting with their own stories. My cousin Jake shared his experience with the fake grandmother story. A high school friend revealed that Brooke had convinced her to invest in a non-existent business venture. Even some of the people who'd stayed in my apartment through her Airbnb scheme came forward with stories about missing belongings and damaged property they'd been afraid to report. But the real avalanche started when the local news picked up the story. This evening at 5, we'll investigate allegations of a family fraud scheme that may have victimized dozens of local residents. By Monday morning, my phone was ringing constantly. But this time, it wasn't angry calls from people Brooke had lied to. It was apologies. My boss called first. Arlo, I owe you a massive apology. After seeing the news coverage and the evidence you've provided, it's clear that the allegations made against you were part of a coordinated harassment campaign. Please report to work Tuesday morning so we can discuss your promotion to corporate headquarters. Sarah's law firm reached out next, offering full support and asking if she needed legal assistance pursuing charges against Brooke for the false accusations. Even Sarah's parents called to apologize and invite us to dinner, admitting they'd been wrong to judge the situation based on Brooke's lies. But the most satisfying call came Tuesday afternoon. Arlo Henderson, this is Detective Martinez with the County Sheriff's Office. We'd like to talk to you about pressing charges against your sister for fraud, identity theft, and filing false police reports. I'd be happy to cooperate with that investigation, I said. Good, because based on what we've uncovered so far, she's looking at serious prison time. 6 months later, I stood outside the courthouse watching Brooke being led away in handcuffs. The judge had sentenced her to 3 years in prison followed by 5 years of probation. during which she'd be required to pay restitution to all her victims, a list that had grown to include 47 people by the time the investigation was complete. My parents stood on the courthouse steps, looking 10 years older than they had at that dinner table. Dad had aged the most. The stress of Brooke's legal troubles, combined with the tax penalties and legal fees that had consumed their retirement savings, had taken a visible toll. "Arlo," Mom called out as Sarah and I walked past them. "Please, can we talk?" I stopped, but didn't move closer. "What do you want to say?" "We're sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We know we should have listened to you years ago. We should have stopped enabling her behavior instead of expecting you to clean up her messes." "Yes, you should have. We lost the house," Dad added quietly. "The legal fees, the restitution payments we're responsible for as her parents, the tax penalties. We're moving into a one-bedroom apartment next week." I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was overwhelmed by the memory of everything they'd put me through. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I was, but sorry didn't mean I was ready to fix their problems for them. "We understand if you can't forgive us," Mom continued, "but we want you to know that we see now how wrong we were, how much we hurt you, how much we took advantage of your love for this family. And we want you to know," Dad added, "that we're proud of you for standing up to us, for refusing to be a victim anymore. You did the right thing, even though it was hard." Those words acknowledgement that it'd been right to protect myself, that it'd been right to refuse to enable Brooke's behavior, meant more to me than any apology could have. "Thank you for saying that," I told them. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it." "Does this mean?" Mom started hopefully. "It means I forgive you," I said carefully. "But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. I can't have people in my life who think my boundaries are negotiable, or my well-being is less important than keeping the peace." "We understand," Dad said, "and we respect that. If you want to rebuild a relationship with me, it has to be on different terms. Terms where my decisions about my own life are respected, where I'm not expected to sacrifice my well-being for family harmony." "Whatever it takes," Mom said quickly. "We want to earn your trust back. Then start by proving you can handle your own problems without expecting me to fix them. Get financial counseling. Figure out your living situation. Build a life that doesn't depend on me bailing you out." They nodded, and for the first time since I was a child, I saw them as real people, with real accountability for their choices, rather than forces of nature that I had to work around. Sarah squeezed my hand as we walked away. "How do you feel?" "Free," I said, and meant it. We drove back to our new house wed, sold the penthouse, and bought a beautiful colonial in the suburbs, complete with a guest room for the children we were planning, and a home office where Sarah could work remotely when needed. The promotion to corporate headquarters had come through exactly as promised, along with a salary increase that put my income well into six figures. Sarah had been made a full partner at her firm after her handling of a major corporate fraud case skills she'd honed, she joked, through dealing with my family's situation. But the most meaningful change had been in my relationships. Sarah's family had not only accepted me fully but had become the supportive, healthy family dynamic I'd never experienced growing up. Her parents checked in on us regularly, offered help without strings attached, and celebrated our successes without trying to figure out how they could benefit from them. It also started a support group for adult children of manipulative families, people who'd been raised to believe that setting boundaries was selfish, and that their resources belonged to whoever claimed to need them most. The group had grown from 5 people meeting in a community center basement to a non-profit organization that helped hundreds of people reclaim their lives from family financial abuse. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't recorded that conversation?" Sarah asked as we pulled into our driveway. "Not really," I said, "because I think the recording just sped up something that was inevitable. Brooke would have kept escalating until she got caught, and my parents would have kept enabling her until they ran out of resources to enable her with. And you. I would have kept being miserable until I finally chose my own well-being over their comfort. The recording just gave me the evidence I needed to make that choice with confidence." We sat in the car for a moment, looking at our home, the life we'd built together based on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine care for each other's well-being. "Are you happy?" Sarah asked. "Completely," I said, and realized it was the first time in my adult life I could say that without qualification. Inside, We found a package on our doorstep. Sarah opened it while I checked the mail, and her surprised laughter made me look up. "What is it?" She held up a beautiful hand-carved picture frame with a note attached. "From your cousin Jake. He says the support group helped him set boundaries with his own family, and he wanted to thank you for showing him it was possible to choose health over guilt." The frame held a photo from our engagement party, surrounded by Sarah's family, my coworkers who'd become genuine friends, and the people from our support group who'd become our chosen family. Everyone in the picture was someone who cared about our well-being rather than what we could provide for them. "You know what this is?" I asked Sarah, studying the photo. "What?" "This is what family actually looks like when it's based on love instead of obligation." That night, as we settled into our evening routine, Sarah reading legal briefs while I worked on materials for the next support group meeting, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The dinner table confrontation that had started as my family trying to hand over my apartment keys had ended with me reclaiming not just my property, but my entire life. I'd learned that saying no to people who claim to love you isn't selfish, it's essential. That protecting yourself from people who refuse to respect your boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their destructive behavior, even if they hate you for it. Brooke would serve her time and hopefully learn to support herself without victimizing others. My parents would learn to manage their own finances and problems without expecting their children to sacrifice their futures for temporary solutions. And I would continue building a life based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than guilt and obligation. As I put the finishing touches on my presentation about financial boundaries in family relationships, I thought about all the people who would hear this message and recognize themselves in it. People who'd been taught that love means letting others take whatever they want from you. People who'd been convinced that standing up for themselves made them selfish or cruel. I hoped my story would give them permission to choose differently, to understand that real love, the kind worth having, doesn't require you to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. "Ready for bed?" Sarah asked, closing her laptop. "Ready for bed." I agreed, saving my work and shutting down my computer. But before we headed upstairs, I took one more look at the photo Jake had sent us. All those faces of people who celebrated our successes instead of trying to exploit them, who offered help without expecting anything in return, who respected our decisions even when they didn't understand them. This was what I'd been searching for my entire life without realizing it. A family that was chosen rather than assigned, built on respect rather than obligation, sustained by love rather than guilt. And it was worth every difficult conversation, every boundary it had to set, every relationship it had to reevaluate to get here. If you've ever found yourself questioning whether you're being too selfish for wanting to protect your own well-being from family members who seem to see you as a resource rather than a person, I want you to know that your feelings are valid. Setting boundaries with family isn't betrayal, it's survival. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is choose your own mental health over keeping everyone else comfortable. What's a boundary you've struggled to set with your own family? Have you ever felt guilty for protecting yourself from people who claim to love you? Share your experiences in the comments below. You might be surprised how many people have walked a similar path. And if this story helped you feel less alone in your own family struggles, please like this video. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming difficult relationships, and share it with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself. Your support helps these messages reach people who desperately need to know they're not crazy for wanting to be treated with respect. Thank you for taking this journey with me. And remember, you deserve relationships that build you up rather than tear you down. Don't settle for anything less.